viskavad aega pilti ja siis ma olen nagu perse ees seal kuradi.
Hope we can start. Good afternoon, everyone. It's indeed the last event of this marvelous conference, and it's good time to say again, thank you for the hosts for this wonderful hospitality, for bringing back the faith of life, and really something in person, which is so loved by everyone, but also this great spirit of conferences in Tallinn, and appreciate very much President Kaljulaid, of course, and whole team of this conference who made it really a success. Now, since I said it's last event, and we asked to focus on very particular issues, and these issues are digitalization, connectivity, and economy, transport, energy. Very difficult to cover everything, and frankly, really a lot of questions on the menu. And these questions could be, are we sufficiently using our economic tools altogether? Are we definitely efficient enough? By the way, this also says that we are not led, we lead. It's a bit provocative and also good question. Are we doing that technically as players in economy sector and as politicians altogether, or also in these organizations we belong to? Is it really a success or not? But this something should be touched upon. Are we sufficiently using other organizations? For instance, 3Cs initiatives is very popular. I have no doubt many those on the panel will be willing to discuss this issue. Is it proper response to Belt and Road Initiative, or it's something else? Are we really successfully doing this? Since two presidents on the panel, so definitely would be good to focus on Baltic region. Are we also successfully developing our regional initiatives? Transport, Baltic, Rail Baltic, electricity, gas, and all these other initiatives. Is it done accordingly, our expectations, or not? Green agenda, also it's related. Is it successful or not? Is it really vehicle for progress, or also giving some restrictions for economic growth? And are we really satisfied with this situation? And since politics is not covered in this title when we're supposed to discuss, but nevertheless, presidents are here, and this final event, so it's natural and obvious that could be some recipes or hints or take-away messages in general terms, and also including politics, because again, coming back to this, I lead, I'm not led. This is really something we should share among ourselves. Are we doing enough? Are we doing really satisfactory? Or we should really increase and improve something? What could be the success? And if you don't mind, so we'll immediately go to the panelists according to these rules of the conference. So 5 minutes for introduction of each of the members. Then maybe could be some exchange among themselves, if it will be the case. And then, as much as possible time, I would like to give to the audience to raise the questions. Use this unique opportunity to ask members of the panel. So with your permission, maybe first I'd like to ask Estonian President Kersti Kaljulaid, again thanking her for her hospitality, for fashionable speech during dinner address, and putting these accents of moral dimension, what was very important, not to forget the values on which we are basing all our projects and initiatives. I in particular like to thank for the words said addressed to Lithuanians. That was also a very precious moment, and indeed, we are fighting with this hybrid threats as we speak, and doing that for the sake of all of us, I believe, and that's really also important. I know that you will be willing to speak whatever you want to say, because it would be strange for me now to frame you in whatever, but I hope you will touch upon issues of connectivity, as you using this term as trusted connectivity, for instance, what that means. Probably it has to do with resilience, and probably it has to do with cyber threats, which is also interesting to hear, and maybe some thoughts about 3Cs initiatives and whatever you would like to outline. So, Madam President, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and indeed, from Friday evening, when it was rather holistic value discussion, we are now down to bean counting, I understand. But you mentioned so many initiatives, and indeed, Rail Baltic, we are ourselves very critical always about the progress of Rail Baltic, but it was probably a surprise for us that when European Union took account of these kind of cross-border projects, this one was going fairly well. Actually was one of the fastest moving, so we shouldn't sometimes be also too critical. Our desynchronization process is going really smoothly, and that's because, of course, we have a kind of common risk and risk understanding why we need to do this quickly. So I think the Baltic states cooperation is normally one of the most efficient and effective, at least in Europe, I believe. Taking the picture wider, then of course you mentioned the 3Cs initiative, and for Egils and me, I am not led, I lead. I mean, really, talks here, because we led, now they led in Latvia. And indeed, it is an initiative which, no, I think you are underestimating it if you say it's countering somehow the Belt and Road. Nothing doing with Belt and Road, frankly speaking. It is an initiative which has made 100 million Europeans and the businesses they have created to look at themselves first time ever as an economic space, a bit more dynamic economic space than European Union as a whole, a bit less developed, particularly infrastructure-wise, than the rest of Europe, and therefore actually offering the opportunity for the whole world to use this region as a test bed. For what? All 3Cs initiatives deal with some kind of connections, roads, rails, pipelines, and of course digital connectivity. But the common theme there is that actually nowadays, whatever it is always digital. It is always smart. There will be a component of systems which talk to each other, talk to us, and we really want to know that this is all they do. That they do not talk about our affairs to anybody else. They have to do what we want the systems to do precisely, and they need to be able to demonstrate to us that that is all they do. That is trusted connectivity. And since 3Cs is a whole and complex, and I hope fast-moving development plan for 100 million people living in the most dynamic part of the Union, this will be, in 20 years' time, hopefully, the most developed infrastructure region in Europe, in the whole Europe. Why it is important we get it right, and we get it based on trusted technologies? Well, imagine we were not using GPS, but GLONASS, everybody of us. Will we feel comfortable? GPS is a system which I asked, I know now. My own son thinks it's a natural resource, he's 12. I mean, he thinks it's directly attached to the magnetic field of the Earth or something. And I had to explain to him that no, this is a technology which has been created and is run by a democracy. And that is why it feels that you can trust it as if it were a natural resource. The threshold to use withholding the service of GPS is extremely high, because it's a principled, value-based society which has built the GPS system. Now, in 21st century, we will rely on all kinds of connections. Our cars will talk to other cars, our roads will talk to our bicycles, our bikes will talk to cars, etc. Our trains will talk to crossings and so on. Do we really feel safe in this world if democracies do not control this kind of connectivity? Frankly speaking, I wouldn't. The situation, of course, is complex and complicated because trade is global. Building different services for different networks is a global business with components coming from all over the world. yet we need to achieve not a single trusted service provider, like in case of GPS, that's so 20th century. In 21st century, we need to agree on a set of standards to make sure that we can trust our connectivity. Be it Blue Dot, be it Build Back Better World, whatever it is. But we here in the Free Seas region are aspiring to be the best test bed to really build trusted connectivity in all spheres of connections. That's, I guess, where we will try to lead and not to be led.
But if I may, just one point, you mentioned yourself, everything is connected, cars, IT, and all systems and management, and even our strategic infrastructure, I would say, how countries were working, and if something will be affected, it could collapse and everything will be ruined. So don't you see any contradictions here in deepening all this connectivity interrelations and at the same time increasing this vulnerability, which could really one day come as a disaster or even catastrophe? Or you think it's manageable?
Oh, I'm quite sure that indeed in the future it's relatively easy to blow up a block of flats by making the refrigerators malfunction. But that's why we need to make sure that in the 21st century, those who control technology are those who will never do it, are those who will never threaten to do it, are those who will never use their technological prowess, like we hope, our international legal space keeps our kind of defense prowess or attack prowess in the conventional warfare in check, because we have agreed to do so. Big powers have decided to leverage the power of small ones by keeping themselves in check. Only these kind of powers can have control of the technology. Complication, of course, rises from the fact that when military equipment is controlled by states, we don't want our technology to be government-built, government-controlled. That's much more complex exercise, but I think we need to resolve it. Otherwise, we will not be able to, in 21st century, to function according to the technological capabilities of humankind. But if we, the free world, will decide that it's too dangerous, we don't do it, then we will look like men from the Stone Age to some of our competitors in this world. I wouldn't want that. So I want to use technology, but I want to make sure that I can trust it.
Sure. Well, next I'd like to now suggest that Latvian president will continue, Mr. Egils Levits. Can I disclose one secret on personal note? When it was long ago, in 1995, two governments were so friendly and were meeting informally, Latvian and Lithuanian, and we played basketball in Jūrmala when Mr. President was Minister of Justice at that time. I was young Minister of Defense. And diplomatically, we do not remember who won at that time, by the way, which is really, we do not remember that. Who cares? But the exercise itself was very, very, really useful. So I hope, Mr. President, you can continue as Estonian president just started, maybe through this initiative, maybe some other issues. But I'd like to ask you, as you're architect of re-establishment of independence in Latvia, you're passionable and still preserving, keeping all this mood inside. Are you satisfied with the way we are going through these 30 years of our independence? Would you single out some more problems, what you could see, where we can improve? Not just us, Baltic states, but in general, again, coming back to this slogan, leading, not led by somebody. Are we definitely of such a situation, comfort to say this? Given the fact that, well, again, politics, let me add something, if you would be willing to share some views. All crises which are emerging, it was covered in other panels, of course. I'm not having no illusions that we will come back again, but since it's final panel, maybe it's appropriate to mention something. All crises which are happening are led by somebody, but not by European Union, by the way. If we will mention, Russian aggression against Ukraine, it's again, Normandy format is engaged, but not European Union. We're talking about Karabakh conflict recently. Russia, Turkey were on board. They managed the situation. Minsk group was put aside or self-isolated itself. It's a different story, but again, something happened. Georgian occupation in 2008 or annexation of Crimea. We see so many disasters here, and definitely something coming up. Are we leading? Are we led? Are we in charge of the agenda or somebody else in charge? Are we really smart enough when talking about ability to act ourselves if others are not willing? But when talking about a term like strategic autonomy, for instance, which was discussed yesterday, some tried to defend this term, some, including myself, tried to question or raise some doubts, because it smells like isolation. We really, given the fact that there are some problems and we can point at each other who is guilty and who did what and what was wrong, but nevertheless, now to split transatlantic unity and cohesion would be also very big mistake, and I hope it will not happen. So many issues, but of course, since you're president, who can advise you what to say? You can say whatever you want on whatever subject. I'm just providing menu, and you can pick up and take whatever you like. So please.
Thank you, Linas. But I also don't more remember the result, but the play was good, very good. So if I'm thinking about leadership in this context of the Mary conference, then you remembered us on 30 years of independence of the Baltic states, and this is an example for leadership of small nations, which at the end led to the change of the world, map. Because you remember, between 85 and 90, the Baltic independence movements were the leaders in reforming and changing the Soviet system. And Moscow was always put in a situation to defense. And we asked more and more and more. At the end, the Soviet Union break down. So we can say that really we have not get the independence because of the breakup of the Soviet Union, but vice versa. The Soviet Union break up because of Latvian, Estonian, and Lithuanian independent and democratic movements. This was a kind of, so to say, collective leadership. Of course, we had also personal, well-known persons who were the leaders of the movements, but this was kind of leadership which changed at the end the map of Europe and also the world. If I'm thinking now on Europe and leadership, then I would say that there are some areas where Europe is one of the leaders, and to stress one of the leaders, not more the leader like 100 years ago at the beginning of the 20th century, when it was self-evident that the European way of life, the European way of thinking was dominating in the world. I think a little bit this idea of dominating of our ideas, our way of life and our perception of the world was in the 90s when we, together with US, and other Western countries in the world thought that our way of life, our democracy is universal, or should be universal. And now, some days ago, we can see in Afghanistan, no, it's obviously not universal, and we should learn from that. So, but where we are leaders as Europe? We are leaders, one of the leaders in economy, one of the big powers. I think this year or next year would be the last year when US will be the biggest economy of the world. I think next year there would be only, US would be only in the second place. And also Europe together is also more or less on the same place as America. And you mentioned transatlantic links, and we are two global players which are very close to each other, but not identical. We have not identical interests, but very close interests. And in difference to other global players like China, where our interests are much more different. And of course, Russia and other smaller, bigger global players are also there. And Europe should find out what is our place in the world, in the global world. So we are leaders, for example, not for example, but especially in the fight against climate change. It's undoubtful. We are leaders, and together with this direction, climate change, we can develop our new technologies, green technologies. It's also has economic repercussions, could have a positive impact of that. We are global leaders, I would say, in some areas of soft power. Europe is, I would say that, standard-setting power. For example, in data protection and in rule of law and other such principles, Europe is really leader, and Europe is very attractive to the world, and therefore it is, of course, that many people will come to Europe to live here. So this soft power is a big potential and should be used. But it is, I think, we cannot more say that we will export our way of life, our perception to the world, to the whole world. It's really not so universal as we thought. I would also mention that in disproportion to the leadership in some areas, the political leadership is very weak in global comparison, I would say. As you rightly pointed out, the crisis around Europe, in Middle East, for example, in Ukraine, we have very little influence to that. And it is a real obvious disproportion between the economic power, also military power within NATO, and the political influence. And I think we are in a new situation as maybe before, that we should really think about not to be marginalized. And this is our task. And we should be very, much more active in a political shaping of the world. The problem is that the European Union, the decision-making process, I would say that we should also establish some kind of procedure, much more clear procedure how to formulate our foreign policy, European foreign policy. And I would propose, so to say, that not only the bigger member states, but all 27 member states are participating, but also not the majority rule which is discussed. But I would propose another rule, no harm principle, that one member state can say no only if it is clear and it explained to other member states that such kind of position, European position, would really harm a member state. And of course, common politics cannot harm. If there is a neutral impact or positive impact, of course, then they cannot say something else, even if there are different preferences. So this is a rather procedural issue. So, and if we are looking to Europe, you mentioned, and my colleague, Estonian colleague mentioned a 3Cs initiative. Also, in order to promote the leadership of Europe, it is also necessary to look to the coherence of Europe as a whole, and then we can discover easily that the central and eastern part of Europe is, in terms of infrastructure, not so developed as the western part. And this is exact the political goal of the 3Cs initiative. 3Cs, that means Baltic Sea, Black Sea, and Adriatic Sea, and all the countries between the 3Cs. We will have a next summit of the 12 member states of the 3Cs initiative, next summit in Riga in July. And also we have partners, US, Germany, and last time also Japan participated in Sofia this year, 1 month ago in Sofia when we had the summit. And our plan is to deepen the political connections on political level, but of course it's in the first place economic project, and to develop all kind of connectivity, as mentioned by President Kaljulaid, also transport, energy, informations, and so on and so on. So an example that is very needed is I will go end of this month to Ljubljana, to Slovenia, and I should go through Istanbul, through Istanbul, and not in a shorter distance. So I think there is a big potential because this area, 3Cs area, is, if we are looking on economic development in the last 20, 30 years, is really an area of growth in Europe. Growth, economic growth, which is much more than the average. But anyway, we should promote that the growth is still there and also increasing. So thank you very much for this small thoughts about leadership, and then we can discuss further. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now I will ask Dr. Sabina Jeschke to continue. And when we talked before this panel, she stressed that she's not politician, technician, but with vast experience, and you really can find some way how to continue what was said, maybe touch upon the issues which were already mentioned. But among other areas, you are definitely could focus on innovations, on high tech, on artificial intelligence. So my question would be, one can say that artificial intelligence coming in very aggressively, maybe sometimes too aggressively. I hope it will not replace, computers will not replace humans in foreseeable future. At least not in this conference, but maybe somewhere else. So how you would see this situation? In particular, let's say without politics, but are we leading as Europeans? What do you think? Are we really adequate to our potential and capabilities in all this competition of technologies? Are we a bit behind? We can mention also 5G, for instance, right? It's also very, very to the point. And are we sufficiently developing ourselves in competing to the 5G provided by China, for instance, which is unimaginable without that. Without these solutions, we cannot, so to say, advance our technologies and economy in general. And again, that's very important and has to do with our leadership as Europeans. So, Dr. Sabina Jeschke.
Yes. Thank you very much, Linas. So I would perhaps like to contribute to the ideas you, President, have been already starting with, but coming not so much from the political or societal angle, but from a technological point of view. I mean, leading in this fourth industrial revolution is very much about leading in politics and economics, but it's leading in technology as well. So we are in this fourth industrial revolution, and if you ask for a very, very short explanation what that is about, it's a dramatic breakthrough in the intelligence of artificial and technological systems. Or in other words, this fourth industrial revolution is about AI. It's an AI revolution in the same way as the first industrial revolution was about steam engines. So this is the main angle. And it means that groups, parties, communities, nations, which are good in artificial intelligence will control the technological development. And of course, there's a lot of chances and a lot of opportunities by artificial intelligence, but there are a lot of risks. There are ethical questions, there are moral questions, there are questions concerning jobs, questions concerning the workforces. You have been asking me when we started the conversation outside, well, when are we going to be replaced by AI? Well, if you are a cab driver, 2025. So it really changes a lot. So therefore, I believe that as Europeans, we have great education, we have great scientists, we have great engineers, and we have very strong commitment now to the funding instruments of the European society. We have everything it takes and everything it needs. However, we could do better. We could do better in terms of taking more risks. I mean, if you see the investments of the European Union into the different scientific projects, as a scientist, I very often have the feeling, well, great choice, but 2 years too late. I often have the feeling that if you invest in a consortium of about 50 companies, including a Volkswagen, including a Siemens, you cannot do something wrong with that. However, the question is, are you really investing into the most bright and most innovative brains, which you perhaps would either find in startups or universities or in companies and structures like the Fraunhofer Institutes? So my plaidoyer is go for AI, come up with standards for artificial intelligence. How do we want it? What do we don't want to do? Connect artificial intelligence with other technologies. The president has been talking about connectivity, and this is very, very important for AI. I mean, assume that I'm asking you to come up with an autonomous car, or to even build a certain component like a full breakage system of an autonomous car. Where would you put the intelligence of the algorithms? Or you would put it into the car, because otherwise you have no chance. I mean, if you would put it into a cloud, the latency time up to the cloud and down is too long. But with 5G and with 6G protocols, which are coming about 2028, the delay, the latency time is so short that you will split the car, the body from the brain, and you have run the algorithms in the brain with a much, much higher precision. So from AI, I'm coming to connectivity, coming to 5G, 6G, and I'm also coming to the topic of quantum computing, which will be a revolution for the world once again. A totally new type of high-performance computing, which allow for simulation in real time, which so far we cannot do. So again, my plaidoyer is let's work together as European United Nations and go for these technology goals, because we have everything, we can do it. We have the education, we have the knowledge. And from the leading in these technological fields, we can apply our standards, our ethical and moralical standards to other places in the world. So this is my short task today.
Thank you, Sabina. Now, last speaker, not least, of course, Jens Henriksson, CEO of Swedbank. I'm a humble customer of your bank. I'd like to ask you to say something. And also, it's interesting. You know, it's a unique composition of presidents and experts, and how to merge sometimes, how to find this common approach or common ground to what we're talking. But nevertheless, I'm trying always a bit to provoke, a bit to say something which financial institutions usually should be non-political, definitely. They have some rules, and that's clear. But let's say recently everyone was surprised, or some even more to say than surprised, when IMF gave 1 billion to Belarus to fight pandemics, according to the rules, right? But knowing how leader of that country, who believes he's still a leader, how he managed the pandemic, and what will be done with this money, how it will look like undermining sanctions by EU and US, and all in all, are we really efficient enough after that move when talking about pressure, about facts like that? So there are some examples where apolitical financial institutions playing politics, knowing or not, but this is the fact. Also, one more question to you. When we're talking about threats, we are less and less talking about conventional threats. We're more talking about hybrid threats, about asymmetric threats. And by the way, even Article 5 was activated, as we know, not literally according to the Washington Treaty, because it should be military attack against military objects. It was, as we know, attack against Trade Center by civilian planes. And the only and first time when Article 5 of NATO was activated. And then there were questions, and what would be a question also for you. Could we really face the situation when some asymmetric threats will come and will undermine strategic communications, maybe banking system in general, which is also very important for survivability and for liveliness of our societies and the countries in general? Could it be also the fact that we should be forced to activate Article 5 because of attacks on these sectors, which are now looks not probable and maybe not even realistic, but who knows in the future? But again, same as I said to other members of the panel, of course you can be free to speak whatever you would like to say, but there are maybe some hints. Please.
Well, thank you, Mr. Ambassador. And I will try to avoid politics, but I'm certain I will probably be tricked into it. Madam President, Mr. President, it's a great honor for me to participate in the same panel as you two. And let me also take the opportunity to thank all the arrangers and the participants, because what you do matters. Discussing foreign and security policies issues, it strengthens us. And inviting friends and allies from all around the world shows that we are not alone here in the far north. Yesterday, when I prepared for the debate, I realized that me and Sabina, we are the only one from big business that are speakers. So, on behalf of business, I say thank you all for making the world a safer place. Without security and without stability, business cannot thrive. Thank you. So the title for this particular seminar is I am not led, I lead. And at the same time, the title for the whole conference is My Neighbor's Problem Today, Mine Tomorrow. And one way to tackle these two issues at the same time is through leading by example. And let me give you 4 points I thought about that. The first one is that economic wealth and standard of living matters. I think it was on Prime Minister Kallas's panel a few days ago that somebody said that the combined GDP are now higher in autocracies than in democracies. And I think it was on the panel on Russia that Sergei Utkin said that Russian youths are skeptical about the quality of life in the West. This is troublesome. We need to deliver sound and sustainable economic growth, and we need to be the shining example on the hill. In my former life, and that was probably why you talked about the IMF, I had the privilege to represent both Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Iceland, among other countries, as a board member of the IMF. And that was the time of the financial crisis, and when both Iceland and Latvian economy were overheated with large imbalances, and I helped them getting fund programs. Since then, all the Nordic Baltic countries have recovered and prospered. And when a few days ago I read the latest Article 5 assessment on both Lithuania and Latvia that came the other day, I was really impressed how well the economies have handled the COVID crisis, and the prospects looking forward are strong. But the scars of the financial crisis are still there. And economic policy mistakes are very costly, and we cannot do it again. Second, since almost 2 years, I am the CEO of Swedbank, and we have 4 home markets: Sweden, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania. And our regions are both the Swedish Savings Banks movement and Hansa Bank. And we are extremely proud to be a systemic bank in all of our 4 home markets. And in the Swedish headquarters, we decide on strategies, risk mandates, policies, and frameworks. But the business decisions in Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania subsidiaries are taken by the local CEO. Ola Vilep over there in Tallinn, Reinis Rubinis in Riga, and Inga Skisaker in Vilnius. And our purpose is to empower the many people and the many business to create a better future. And that is to finance infrastructure and connectivity, and to work with the entire financial system towards our goals. It's a big task, and that is something that we can only do if we help each other with knowledge and information. We want Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania to prosper. Good for you, good for the region, good for the world, good examples, and good for our bottom lines. Third, on the panel of China, I think it was Mr. Saran that said that the economic landscape will be totally different 20 years from today due to digitization and new energy sources. And this is an opportunity. And our vision is a financially sound and sustainable future. And we want to be a part of that transformation of our home markets, to fight climate change, to clean up the Baltic Sea, because it is the right thing to do. And because we cannot recruit the best young minds if we are not a part of the Green Revolution. Because it's good for energy and food security, because our customers will demand it from us, because, Madam President, it's in our posture. And, once again, because it's profitable. To lead is to be competitive. And finally, my fourth point. How can we then, as a bank, as you alluded to, contribute to security and stability? Well, first, and this comes from the CEO of Swedbank, make sure that we fight financial crime and money laundering, something we really learned the hard way. And making sure that we have stable, efficient IT systems. Be there for our customers in both good and bad times. Be a good corporate citizen, educating financial literacy. Look at the stability of the whole financial system. Earn sustainable profits. Pay our taxes. Participate and sponsor important events like the Leonard Mary Conference, so that our region can be a good example for others to follow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Now, asking members of the panel, do you have some remarks or some follow-up thoughts of what was said, or some nice words to each other? If not, we can immediately address the audience, I believe, because time is running. Oh, yeah, Madam President.
I just wanted to say that if I hear the business side, and since this is the chance for them to speak on this conference, I hear a demand there. I mean, you have established that technology definitely is the defining force. So if I now think I'm on the public sector side, then what I need to do in that case, I mean, I need to create permissive legal space precisely to allow that, I mean, our partners and allies in general, more general democratic world is the one who will also win financially. I always say that first ones win and the last ones pay. But there is more to win than financial benefits. There is obviously, what to win is the ability to benefit most from these new technologies. And there we need to make sure that we serve our private sector and enterprises well. I give you just one example where this has not yet happened, but I hope it will. European Union has created a set of standards on how you can use biometric data. It has created it for inland security needs. But it should open the same standard box for the private sector use, because we need common standard for private and public. And I mean, private sector is also looking, I mean, how they could safely invest using biometric data. They don't know how they could, because there is no standards. Standard has been created, but we've been egoistic about it. So we in public sector, we must always think that we do create this permissive legal space. Now, of course, I very much envy our ancestors on the political scheme who had 100 years to create the traffic code before the highways was invented. We don't. Technological cycle is much shorter than legal cycle nowadays, which means we should be really careful that we only regulate for objectives, never pathways. Means we have to tell what technology has to do, not how you need to reach that. To give you an analogy from paper world. We tell doctors, keep my file safe. We don't say it has to be in green safe or a red safe. For some reason in technology, because we don't trust it, we try to regulate pathways. Shouldn't do. And last remark, once taking into account that tech cycle is shorter than legal cycle, we should try to legislate for general AI or singular AI, and therefore the lower levels of technology will be covered. As you said, it's not that far away. Let's get our political act together. This is how we can serve this world.
Thank you. President Levits, please.
Yeah, thank you. In continuation of that, what Madam President Kaljulaid said, and you, Madam Jeschke, I wanted to stress that the development of technology, you spoke about 5G and artificial intelligence, it is only the third question. I think the first question is a political question, what we want from the technology. Then the second question is a judicial or legal question, how we can by legal means or by legal means to reach our goals, our political goals. And then the third question is the technical question, how we can shape our technologies. This is a question for engineers. But first of all, I think we are weak at the moment in the first and in the second step, because the engineers are going the first. And then there are different solutions proposed and very fast development. But this could also lead to some disbalance and disruptions, societal disruptions. And therefore, we should give much more attention to the political issues and also to the legal issues, also to create a framework for technological development, especially artificial intelligence, so that we are, so to say, at the end, not led by technology, but that our society is led by human beings. Thank you.
So it's all for now from this side. Now we can ask audience, and just please remind who you are, to whom you are addressing the question. Make it as short as possible, and please maybe starting with this gentleman in front, and then on that side I see JJ, right? Okay.
Yes. Veikos Volits, Latvian Institute of International Affairs, and I have a small appeal to make, and I have also a question arising from the Jens Henriksson's presentation. So I was inspired by the Latin name of I am not led, I lead, and President Kaljulaid was referring to the Rail Baltic on its proper way. And I was asked by the former Estonian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Trivimi Velliste, to remember that actually in the early 90s we had the same problem which we have today. So therefore I appeal to the both presidents and to Linas as former Minister of Foreign Affairs that actually in the 90s there was a discussion whether it should be via Baltica or via Baltic. And now we have Rail Baltica, so we are mixing Latin and English, and it's very appropriate to this conference of this year. So therefore, if you could appeal to the board of directors of Rail Baltic to change it from Rail Baltica into Rail Baltic, it would be very nice and very short and concise. This is my appeal. But my question to Jens Henriksson is that you said that you've been taking care of the Baltic states and Iceland in IMF board. So therefore, it's very appropriate to this conference when we discussed about the acts of the third countries in our external border, particularly Belarus. And Belarus is about to be assigned a 1 billion tranche by IMF board. So you, as being working in IMF board, perhaps you could give some insights. What is the way to lead to prevent this money disbursed to the Lukashenko regime? Thank you.
Could you?
Well, first I would say that's an important decision to make by the board of directors or the executive directors in the IMF board. That is, what you do then is you talk with the capitals. And you have a Nordic-Baltic constituency, and then this is a discussion, will be a discussion that was then transmitted to sort of US and ED what to vote there. The second thing is that IMF is very sort of much driven by the United States. What the United States does is important, and also sort of the European Union and Euro Working Group is strengthening itself, but still it's an American institution. Everybody, all the economists there, is the largest gathering of economists in the world, are trained in US, sort of in US universities. So that means that what the US does and says is important. The third thing is you need to sort of think about, in the end, ordinary people. And I understand that a lot of, there are countries, well, I understand, of course there are a lot of countries that sort of do really bad things, led by really bad people. But the question you need to ask yourself in the board is, what do we do for the ordinary man and woman on the street? And sort of finding ways on sort of how to help people live with COVID and sort of and take care of that is good both for the ordinary men and women on the ground, but in the end it also affects our global, the global system.
That's it, yeah? Thank you. Yes,
May I counter?
Sure.
My question is, should there be some kind of conditionality? I mean, IMF is not exactly Red Cross who negotiates with everybody to get people fed and lives saved. Should there be conditionality?
Well, I don't think that you should sort of, when it comes to saving lives, should be sort of conditionality on issues like that. There are tons of countries in Africa where you have a lot of problems and you still help them. And this is complicated. Look at Russia, for instance. The IMF is still having a discussion on a part of that. But in the end, Madam President, I think it's you that decides and not me as a humble CEO.
Yeah, good. Humble.
Well, personally, I think there should be conditionality, because in my mind, IMF is not Red Cross. That's Red Cross's job to work unconditionally. At least IMF used to have conditions when we were, moving in these circles who needed help, I remember.
Satisfied, yes?
Well, Madam President, we give conditions when we lend out money as well, so I'm not sort of afraid of sort of.
Now let's move to JJ, I believe, yeah? He was first.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to say thank you to the Lennart Meri team for putting together such an excellent conference and all the great panels and panelists. My question is directed towards you, President Kaljulaid, and President Levits, and you as well, Ambassador Linkevičius. Talking about the future, breathing space to do what you need to do, whether it's financial security, addressing the challenges of the future, remaining connected to each other, strengthening NATO, cyber conflicts, dealing with all of that, and how to deal with the immediate threats, like right now on the borders. There are some regional players that are engaged in weaponization of migrants, and there's also the issue of Zapad, border threats. How do you have the space and the time to deal with those immediate threats? And if so, how do you deal with them so that you can plan for the future comfortably and accurately? Thank you.
Thank you. So, presidents, who start?
I could say yes, of course we have to have time, and yes, of course we deal. I think, first of all, Lithuania and also Latvia have taken certain measures to make sure that according to the international law, but nevertheless they're able to protect their borders. Second, as political leaders, of course, then we have to explain to our own people and to the European Union and other counterparts that what we are doing is within, indeed, the international legal space. I'm quite sure Egils will go lengthily into this discussion. But in European Union, our common understanding is that, that this kind of situation has been tried and tested in international courts, Spain versus the Ceuta and Melilla case versus Morocco, and this has been charged to be according to the international law. Because what is going on is that there are people in Belarus coming from Iraq and faraway places who are perfectly safe in Belarus. It is not true for Belarus opposition, but these people are safe in Belarus. So the case is exactly the same. And what we have built is the EU-wide consensus that this is how it is. And I think indeed that we should always be very clear in our messaging, but also, of course, making then sure that if there are, humanitarian causes which we need to deal with, that we will resolve these issues together with the bodies which we have on our multilateral scene, who are used to dealing with humanitarian cases in that case. Well, it is something which I see we now have EU-wide consensus. And I hope that this consensus will help us to make sure that there is no more unnecessary human suffering based on false promises given by somebody who has absolutely no right to give this kind of promises. Egils will be much more legally nuanced now, I know.
Will you come in?
Yeah, very short. I agree with President Kaljulaid. I can also remind that today no member state of the Union will or want to repeat the situation of 2015. And there is consensus that the borders should be guarded. But this is my opinion that European Union should help the states which are not far away from the states where the migrants are coming, in order to save them there. And it would be fair if we would help them financially and by technical means. But 2015 should not be repeated. This is not only Latvian or Estonian position, but the position of the whole European Union.
I would add briefly that sometimes we're lagging behind the events and our structures are old-fashioned. And I remember in NATO when I served a long time in NATO, and remember when we engaged in the operations in the Arab world, recognized nobody speaks in Arabic in the NATO HQ, for instance. And the question was why? Because it was not necessary. But that's the point. And it happens when it comes to Baltic states that we always were exposed to the first rows of this hybrid threats, basically. And I remember, again, energy security in NATO had difficulties to explain to the military authorities that NATO has something to do with energy security. And before 2006, it was no go. In 2006, during Riga summit, it was put on the decision sheet of heads of state, and now we have taskings, and that's fine. Nobody's surprised. And again, not by accident, in 3 capitals of Baltic states, we're hosting centers of excellence dealing exactly with these hybrid threats. Cyber, strategic communications, and again, energy security in Vilnius. So sometimes we're lagging behind, but we are in the position to be on the front lines of this vulnerable, so to say, situation, and definitely we're contributing to that extent, I believe, and that would be also in the future the case. Yes, please, lady here, and then lady in the middle.
Hi, Rebecca, I work for NATO. 2 fairly simplistic questions for Jens and Sabina. I'm curious, or I want to offer you a platform to give advice to policymakers on how to not hamper innovation, but also put regulations in place that binds the private sector to frame their efforts within the spirit of so-called Western values. And the second, that's related to that question, is how do our governments recruit the experts that understand the technology, but also the political policy processes in competition with you all in the private sector? Thank you.
Sabina first.
Thank you. So I'm starting with the second question, so you are totally right. In Germany, and I believe this is the case for other European countries as well, it's very, very difficult to get the specialists in the public sector because everybody wants to go for Amazon, Google, or perhaps for Daimler, BMW, and the rest of it. So this is really a big issue. However, we see a certain change. I have been with Deutsche Bahn and the executive board, you know that. And we found that in the last years, it was kind of easier to get IT specialists than locomotive drivers. Because the Deutsche Bahn now, for example, it's kind of a symbol in Germany towards a more green mobility. Therefore, it has a very positive image. It has not ever had that. And today it has not because we have a lot of problems right now. But in general, the image of Deutsche Bahn changed, and because of that, the IT specialists are coming just by themselves. We're also having a lot of interesting programs for them, like pitch nights and so on. But in general, it's the image of the company which has changed. I believe this can be transferred to other public areas as well. So if the image changes, there is a lot of young people who wants to do something, you know, with a purpose. So this is my answer to your second question. The first question is much more complicated because there is of course, there is a gap, or there is kind of a trade-off between, of course, you have to have regulations. If you have too strong regulations, nothing will happen, and then the people will go to the United States, to China or Korea or whatever, and do their innovation there. Of course, you have to have regulations, but you have to kind of open up for new ideas. Perhaps part of the solution is what the president has been saying, that you have to state the goal, but not the way. So you have to come up with some rules which are rules for everybody, and we have to stick to these kind of rules. But don't give too much, you know, rules which way to take to reach that goals. Then people again start to be innovative.
Well, it's a very tricky question. I mean, we are a bank, and that means that we operate within the boundaries. There is no sort of human rights to run a bank. It's given a permission by the director generals in sort of Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and Sweden, and we need to sort of follow the laws, and it's a lot of laws. And we're talking meters if you look on the regulation that. So we need to be within that. Then we have values, and those values are sort of, you need to live them every day. And as you know, we did not live up to our values when you can read in the newspapers the problems we had. So you have a disconnectivity here, and that's something I work very much with, so really work according to our values. But we also have contractual obligations. And it's a law. We need to sort of, when people come to us, we need to give them accounts. And how do you find this balance? And then on top of this, we want to sort of go and take further steps ahead. So look on climate change. We just decided that we will stop financing what we call unconventional gas and oil production. We have stopped to sort of fund new drilling in new oil fields and issues like that. So we take a moral stance, but on the same time living with this complex regulatory environment decided by the politicians, in the end by the people.
Thank you. That was lady in the middle.
Hello, Teresa Fallon, Center for Russia, Europe, Asia Studies. Thanks to the panel and the wonderful discussion and excellent conference. I have a quick question. Madam President, you started the whole conference talking about my neighbor's problem today is mine tomorrow. And then, Mr. President, you mentioned one way is to have this no harm principle as a way to break the logjam of EU member states blocking certain foreign policy initiatives. So we've seen, and since the moderator is also Lithuanian, I'm going to mention this kind of the EU anti-coercion instrument. And I think that this has been really championed since what happened in Lithuania. For example, recently Beijing has said that Russia, Belarus, and China should join together to punish Lithuania. So how do we see this region? Do you feel that EU member states have supported Lithuania, keeping in mind the idea of my neighbor's problem today is mine tomorrow? Thank you.
Well, obviously I'm not Lithuanian to answer the question whether EU has supported, but frankly speaking, I think we do normally stick together in the union and speak with one voice particularly, and the better, I mean, the bigger the threat, the most obvious to everybody that there is something brewing, the better we are. So if you ask my prediction, 17 plus 1 will morph into 27 plus 1 rather quicker than slower, and that will actually resolve quite a lot of this discussion about how to also help the countries in the region vis-à-vis the big powers of this world. I think actually we are far too negative about how much we do for each other in the union. I mean, try to imagine any alternative. I mean, how would we, if there were no union structure which leverages small democracies and where big ones take into account the true Helsinki spirit daily, basically, in our Brussels discussions? I cannot think of a better functioning way for any of us. So if it's not perfect, it's the best we have. And frankly speaking, I get nervous and feel it might be somebody else's stratcom who wants to present us as weak. I mean, after all, it's Europe which is saving this planet, because without our green bubble, which is, I mean, much more airtight than anybody else's, this planet will not be saved, as simple as such. So I'm very proud of the union, have been always, and will continue to be, unless it truly fails us. It isn't on the way to do that.
Mr. President, no?
I would say that the image of the public image of the European Union is much worse as a real politics and real effectiveness. Concerning this no harm principle, it's only a small procedural issue, because till now the most questions on the European position in foreign policy should be taken by unanimity. So to say, each member state can block. There are also proposals which are discussed that it should be enough majority. That means a majority can take decisions without relying to minority. And I think my proposal, no harm principle, is something in between. So to say, it is not enough, like now, to say no, simple no. It is necessary to explain, maybe in detail, why it is a real harm for a member state in order to allow the member state to say no. It is so to say, not the simple majority as proposed, and also not unanimity as today, but something in between, and I think it would be a fair solution in order to make the European decision-making in foreign policy issues more quick, more effective.
I would add, as Lithuanian was asked, it happens that really our region now exposed to all these threats, and Lithuania in particular also facing this hybrid attacks. And it comes to my mind that really we seeing this going from outside like a test therapy, you know, and these methods of hybrid threats and tools enriching. As we remember in the past, there were green men, right, in Ukraine, then there were white trucks bringing not medical equipment, but something else. Hijacking of civilian planes was also kind of hybrid attack. Now this weaponization, at least to be said, instrumentalization of migrants. That means we have to, and we appreciate very much support which was given by European Union, by our allies, material support and also solidarity, political, but we have also to adjust our policies. We have to make sure that our methods are up to date. Because when talking about migration in general, it's not a crime. It's right of the people. It should be done legally. But if it's used, these people are deceived, abused, and used massively, victimized also to some extent. We cannot treat this as normal migration flow. It's something else. So we have to review our migration policy to make sure that our return policy is more efficient, that external borders are also protected, including physically, which was not very popular in the past, but this is also a must probably when we are dealing with this massive floods in the future, to shorten bureaucratic procedures, not to make it timeless, process in the future, for the sake of these people and also for the sake of the order. So this is definitely something we have to be quite vigilant at the same time, but also react on time, not too late. Sometimes we are late, and that's therefore this effect is partial. But in general, we feel really, on one hand, exposed to these threats, but on the other hand, we feel that we have something to contribute to our common policies and really recommendations what could be done collectively in order to withstand what is happening. I hope it's one remark and the last one, because it's already time. So please, gentlemen here, and that will be, looks like will be all.
Thank you. Nigel Gould-Davis from the International Institute for Strategic Studies in London. It's a question in particular for Mr. Henriksson, but it's a public policy issue as well, so others on the panel may wish to comment. So you referred to the extent of the regulations that you need to follow. In addition to that, of course, as you'll be well aware, there's an escalation underway in so-called ESG requirements, social expectations as well as legal ones, environmental security and governance. Now, this is very significant in its own terms, but there's an international dimension as well, and even a security dimension. If one looks, let's take the most prominent example at China, which is simultaneously becoming more adversarial. Its human rights record is deteriorating, yet also it remains a rapidly expanding and attractive market. So how does the private sector, how should they think about that in respect of ESG requirements? It's no longer about shareholder value, but a much wider set of considerations, again, with international, therefore public policy dimension. What is the state of private sector thinking about all of that? Thank you.
Well, I would say it's not a simple question. It's a question, I think, that a lot of people sort of look themselves into the mirror and think what you do. And if you look on what's going on in China, China is moving in the wrong direction. But I think sort of the general attitude sort of coming from a small country, and that is that trade opens up countries, and trade in the long run, trade and discussion and openness is something that advances countries for the future. And in the long run, I still believe that sort of the future for China lies in a democratic, open state. So that is the overall thinking. Then we are there for our customers. And if the customers, we have a lot of international firms and businesses that do business there. Of course, we're going to help them sort of advance their markets and do. But we also need to be sort of very clear and open and speak our minds. And I think this is an issue that will come back and will be sort of one of the biggest issues in sort of ESG matters in the coming years.
You went on this, no?
Well, normally it's me who is naive and optimistic, but I think Jens just beat me there in China. Thank you, Jens, for being even more optimistic.
Well, okay. Now, time to say something for the end, and maybe each of you, maybe you have some 1 or 2 words or some 1 sentence as a wrap-up and kind of conclusion or takeaway, whatever you wish after this panel. And maybe I will start with vice versa order. Maybe Jens, you will start.
No, I meant what I said. I said, thank you for inviting me. Thank you for doing this conference. This is important issues, and we, as Swedbank, see Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania as our home markets, and we're extremely proud to be allowed to be here.
Yeah, Sabina?
Yes, I would very, very close to Jens, so thanks for having me. It's my 3rd time in Tallinn. I really appreciate being here. I'm sure I will come back, so thanks again.
President Levits.
Yeah, coming back to the heading of our discussion, I would say that Europe should more be aware of the problem that Europe is not more leading power in the world, and how to not be marginalized. Also, more to think about our role in the world and to strengthen our political power. Thank you.
Thank you. President Kaljulaid?
Well, I would like to thank our private sector partners here, and precisely because I think Estonia is the place where the private and public sector operate most in unison, starting from labor market, coming to digital service offer. We are all in it together in this country. Here, definitely we lead together with you, particularly our banks. Thank you.
So in my turn, I'd like to say once again thanks to the organizers, for hosts, and for wonderful hospitality. And let's stay connected and stay negative. Thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Dear delegates, thank you for a panel once again. It is time to say final words as the conference is about to end. I'm not going to keep you long. It is just maybe some words what we have been through during these 3 days. You as delegates, us as organizers, we are not going to speak about it, of course. But I think that I'm not trying to be exhaustive, but I think that what we all felt during these 3 days, it is that it's good to be back. That break has been long and it was really time to catch up. If we kind of compare it to the last conference, then there are always the traditional topics and geographic areas what rest in our agenda. And I'm pretty happy that we deal with them constantly, that we have a continuity in this. But I'm also happy that we adapt to the situation, what is changing constantly. And so this year, for first time, we had people from India, Saudi Arabia, Iran speaking in panels. And I do really think that it was enriching to everybody. It was of course, that some of the topics as NATO, Russia, European Union, they remain the same. The angles change from year to year. It is, of course, and then we can't escape the reality of a day. So I think that during this conference, I don't even know if there was a panel where word Afghanistan was not pronounced at least once. But it is why we are here. We are here first to speak about the wider tendencies, to try to find out that what are the new trends, but also to speak really what's going on right now and make the first-hand analysis. I think that the title of the conference, My Neighbours' Problem Today, Mine Tomorrow, is relevant more now than it was maybe 15 years ago. But it is also that our neighborhood, the definition of a neighborhood, is changing and it is getting wider. Population is dense, and I think that just living in this widening neighborhood makes it harder and harder to ignore the fires on our neighborhood. And trying to make a journey from the beginning of the conference to the end of it. Then in the opening panel, Yasha Monk quite shortly said that we are in deep shit. And I think that it is time now once again to turn our President Lennart Meri and use his quote I agree that the situation is not good, but Lennart Meri once told that shit is a good fertilizer for the future. So I think that it is a good ground for next year's conference. With next year, we mean to turn back to our normal routine and to start like yearly annual May conference. I'm very glad to announce next conference, what will take place from 13 to 15 May in 2022 in Tallinn. And I would welcome you all then. My final words would go to the words of gratitude. So first I would like to thank President Kersti Kaljulaid and her team, Minister of Defense and Minister of Defense, also Minister of Foreign Affairs and all the good friends. We had excellent cooperation. We thank all sponsors and partners without whom it would not been possible absolutely to do it. And I'm really gratitude to the whole team of ICDS and the whole team of Lennart Meri Conference. I name them and I think that really we can just say a huge thank you all together. They are Maret, Piret, Triin, Arle, Epp, Pia, Kristi, Mele, Kerant, some others. So thank you. You made it. I also want to pay my special thanks to all the team of volunteers who has made just great work. They worked day and night whenever it was necessary. They were always there. They were always reliable. I'm really thankful. I'm thankful also to RGB, our technical partner, with the head of Ivar staying there. And through years, it has been just great. I thank the other parts of technical team and team who stays behind the stage, also photographers and our makeupper who was really very kind and friendly. So I also wanted to thank the embassies with whom we closely cooperated to get higher politicians, functionaries here. And I think that I pay my special gratitude to Czech Ambassador David Kral, who graciously gave his government plane for foreign ministers to all get together with Stefano Sinino straight from Germany to a conference. So without this, we couldn't have done it. In the end, I wanted to thank all the speakers and moderators, because you were who made the quality of the discussions, that you actually gave the leading tone, and I'm really grateful for all your kind of flexibility. You know well that this year it was maybe a bit more difficult to organize it. And then last but not least, dear delegates, I'm immensely grateful for you to coming here through all the obstacles, just staying flexible, staying patient, being here, deciding that it's time to come, that it's time to see each other. I'm really grateful. With this, I say that Lennart Meri Conference 2021 is finished, and see you next year. Thank you.